In the remote mountains of Serengeti National Park, where footpaths are no more than burnt grass trails between rock and wind, there is a small cave facing west. Each morning, as the first light quietly slips between the sharp edges of stone, an old lion steps out from the darkness. Its fur is no longer thick. Its dark mane, once blazing like fire, is now patchy, thin, and gray like ashes. Its eyes are slightly clouded, but still sharp. The same gaze that once froze antelopes in the desert now only reflects the empty sky above. It stands for a while at the mouth of the cave, head raised, facing the wind. Every breeze carries the smell of scorched trees, hot rock, and sometimes the scent of a wandering leopard from the grasslands below. No scent unsettles it. No creature sees it as a threat anymore. Because it is no longer a king. In its youth, it ruled a vast stretch of savannah. Its roar once made the ground tremble. The scars on its face, remnants of battles for dominance, stood as proof of an unquestionable reign. Lionesses followed it. Other predators avoided it. The pride belonged to it. But that was many rainy seasons ago. When its claws began to dull, when its steps slowed, when even a light pounce collapsed a shoulder, it knew its time was over. And like all wise beasts, it left. No farewell roar. No final battle. Just one blistering afternoon, when it quietly walked away from the pride, leaving its last roar to be scattered by the wind unheard. Since then, it chose the mountains, a place with no rivals, no pride, no rules, only rock, wind, and silence. Its life now revolved around small prey, rock rats, lizards, weak hares. Sometimes it caught the scent of antelope in the distance, but never fast enough to catch them. Once, it could leap 10 feet in a single stride. Now, every jump came with gasping breath. It kept living. Not out of hope, but because instinct wouldn't let it lie down. Some nights, the old wound on its left flank throbbed with pain. It had taken a hit from a buffalo once while defending its cubs. Those cubs had grown. They might now rule their own lands. It didn't know. It didn't need to. Only the memories remained, drifting in with the wind each morning as it lay still. Memories of the first time it roared before the pride, of the last victorious hunt, of the look in a lioness's eyes as she lay beside it, sleeping peacefully to the rhythm of its breath. Memories like wisps of smoke, gone quickly, but leaving ashes inside. That day, the sky wasn't its usual blue. Gray clouds stretched across the mountain peaks. The wind was still. No warning signs. The old lion lay quietly beneath a low tree, where there was shade and soft ground. Its stomach ached with hunger, but its eyes remained wide open, tracking every small movement in the grass. And then it saw a deer, thin, young, likely lost from the herd. Not the most worthy prey, but to the lion now, it was a chance for survival. It rose, no roar, no warning. Every stride sent pain shooting through its shoulders. Every leap tore open another piece of memory. I used to be faster than this, stronger than this. But now, only determination remained. The deer sensed the threat. It ran, not fast, but faster than the old lion. It headed west, toward the towering rocks that formed the mountain's ancient walls. Dangerous terrain, but a possible escape. The old lion chased. Sand flew into its eyes. Its breath came in gasps, like wind trapped and choked in its throat. But it didn't stop, because if it stopped, there would be no other chance. And then it slipped. A rock rolled under its paw. Its front legs lost balance. Its full weight lunged forward. It tried to grip something, but too late. Its whole body slid. Not a clean fall, but a scraping descent down a steep, sheer rock face, until a jutting ledge caught it, leaving it stuck, back against stone, claws clinging to the edge like a living anchor. A roar burst out, loud, short, sharp, a roar of instinct, knowing it was falling toward death. The wind began to pick up. Below was a deep drop, no foothold, no roots. Each minute, its claws dug in less. Its back legs kicked against the stone, but couldn't gain momentum. Blood seeped from its paws, soaking into the cracks like a final whisper. The deer was gone. No tracks, no sound. Only the lion and the wind remained. It roared again, longer, weaker. But still it roared, not to call prey, not to warn enemies, but so someone, anyone, might hear the last voice of a creature that was once a king. The wind on the mountaintop began to grow stronger, carrying a chill from higher up. The old lion still clung to the ledge, its front claws buried deep in a crack, its body pressed flat against the stone, part of it hanging in the empty air. Its hind legs trembled from strain and exhaustion. Its whole body twitched, the aging muscles forced to tense far beyond their limits just to hold on to that fragile thread of life. But its strength had long since faded. It tried to roar again, a sound that no longer echoed like it once did, but came out like breath forced through a clenched throat, both strained and choked. A roar that held both fear and the desperate will to live. But no one heard it. Time passed with cruel slowness. 1 hour, then 2, then 3. No prey, no animals. No one crossed this rocky mountain region in the heat of afternoon. The light faded, shadows stretched, and the sky turned a copper hue, as if nature itself was preparing to quietly close a chapter of life. The old lion was still there, eyes open, staring into the gray sky. Each breath brought a spasm in its belly. Its tongue was dry. The blood from its paws had started to clot. A sharp pain ran along its spine, making every movement an act of torture. It tried to shift upward. The crack in the rock groaned. Its claws slipped. Its back scraped across the jagged surface, leaving a long scratch. It roared in pain, this time not to call for anyone, but simply to hear that it was still alive. The roar was weak, but it slipped between the cliffs, carried farther than expected. A few kilometers away, on a dusty mountain road, Kamau, a park ranger with the national park, was driving his off-road truck back to the ranger station after checking boundary markers. He was a man familiar with every sound of the wild, the call of monkeys, the slither of snakes, the creak of trees against rock. But the sound he'd just heard made him ease off the gas. He turned off the engine, opened the door, and stepped out. The wind carried the sound again to his ears, a roar unlike any other, not loud, not fierce, but heavy, like the final note of a fading soul. Kamau squinted, trying to locate it. He wasn't sure, but something in his instincts pulled him in that direction. He had no gun, only a knife, flashlight, rope, and a roll of bandages. And one other thing, the heart of a man who'd seen too many fragile moments of survival. After 10 minutes of weaving through bushes and rocks, Kamau stopped at the edge of a steep slope. Before him stood a sheer cliff, and below it, a deep gorge with no visible bottom, and a silhouette, unmistakable, dangling on the edge of the rock. A male lion, big, heavy, old. Kamau instinctively took half a step back, but didn't retreat. The creature didn't look at him the way a predator looks at a man. It looked at him with different eyes, tired, resigned, but not without hope. One of the lion's paws slipped a few more inches. Kamau stepped forward, cautiously. No loud calls, no waving arms. He simply crouched and whispered, "I see you. Listen, I'm gonna try, but you have to stay calm." The old lion lifted its head. Drool dripped from the corner of its mouth. A faint, broken roar escaped, more like a torn breath than a threat, as if to say, "I'm still alive." Kamau lowered his body, crept a few steps closer. What do you think about this story? If you found it interesting, comment good. If you weren't satisfied, type 1. And if you have your own opinion, feel free to share it in the comments section. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel. It's completely free, but means so much to me. Thank you very much. Stones shifted beneath his feet. One wrong move and both would fall. But he didn't stop. He placed a hand gently against the rock, measuring distance. One more step, and he'd reach the lion's bleeding front legs. The old lion stayed still. No roar, no flinch. Its eyes locked on the man, as if handing over the right to decide its fate. Kamau uncoiled the rope from his shoulder and tied it around his waist. He knew he had only one chance. The rock began to shift slightly as he leaned forward and grabbed the lion's front leg, once powerful enough to tear enemies apart, now thin and cold. The animal didn't resist. Kamau whispered, "Stay still, old friend. I'm pulling you up." The wind blew harder again. This time, the wind brought a chance. Kamau tightened his grip around the lion's leg, lowered his center of gravity, and began to pull. The creature cooperated, not resisting, not struggling, only pushing back with its hind legs against the rock, trying to find some support. And just like that, inch by inch, they climbed back from the edge of death, bound by a quiet agreement. Kamau's hands were clenched tightly around the lion's front leg. The narrow ledge gave him no room to plant his feet solidly. Both man and beast hung suspended on the edge of the abyss, like some cruel test from nature itself. A faint groan escaped the lion's throat. It was no longer a roar, no longer a call, just a sound of life, small, lonely, but not yet gone. Kamau held his breath and poured all his strength into his arms. His shoulder muscles strained, his core tightened. Every fiber of muscle felt as if it might tear under the pressure. Still, he pulled, inch by inch, centimeter by centimeter. The rock beneath them sank slightly, slick from a thin layer of moss. One of the lion's paws slipped, its whole body tilted farther toward the void. Kamau dropped to his knees, gripping tighter, his entire weight concentrated in his arms to hold on to that flickering life. "No, don't fall," he whispered, like a prayer. "You have to live." The lion didn't give up either. Though its body was failing, the instinct to survive still burned in every claw. It kicked its hind legs against the cliff face, trying to create some lift. Its claws scraped across the rough surface, leaving faint, blood-streaked gouges. But it didn't stop. It let out a roar, faint but unmistakable. Kamau looked up, their eyes met for the briefest moment. And in that instant, he understood. It was working with him. It was fighting, too. The strongest wind of the afternoon swept past, carrying the sound of loose rocks falling. Kamau leaned sideways, bracing his foot into a crevice to counter the pull. One hand still on the lion, the other hooked the rope to a nearby rock outcrop. Every movement was a gamble with death. 1 second too late, gone. One wrong angle, lost to the abyss. Sweat stung his eyes. His hands were numb from cold and tension. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. At last, through the combined force of man and beast, the lion's chest cleared the ledge. Kamau gasped for air, then with one final effort, hauled the full weight of that massive body onto solid ground. The lion collapsed onto the warm stone, breathing hard, chest heaving. Kamau's knees buckled as he let go. He fell backward, chest rising and falling, his face smeared with sweat and dust. No one moved. No one spoke. There were only 2 living beings, one human, one animal, lying side by side on the border of life and death, quietly breathing. A minute passed, then 5, then 10. The lion didn't leave. Kamau didn't get up. They simply breathed, watching each other from a short distance, as if neither wanted to break whatever had just been formed, fragile but deep. When his breath had settled, Kamau slowly sat up, eyes still on the animal. He didn't know if its behavior might suddenly change. Even after saving it, he knew. A lion was still a wild creature. That instinct to defend itself didn't just disappear. But the lion didn't roar, it didn't snarl, it simply turned its head slowly to look at Kamau, and then it lowered its head. Not all the way down, but just enough to send a message, "I am grateful." Kamau didn't approach, but he didn't back away either. He placed a hand on his chest and breathed slowly. His heart was pounding. The mix of fear and emotion surged through him like a flooded river. The lion sat up. Its body trembled for a moment, not out of rage, but from exhaustion. It wavered, but didn't fall. The wounds on its legs still bled, but in its eyes, the fire had returned, even if just a spark. Kamau smiled. "You did good, old friend," he said softly. "You did good." The lion stepped closer, a short distance, and then stopped. Kamau stayed still, his hand brushing against the rope marks on his waist. He wasn't sure whether to retreat or stay, but the lion did nothing. It just stood there, breathing steadily, then let out a low roar. Not a warning, not a call to others, but something like a reply. The sound echoed gently in the mountain's hollow, bouncing off the cliff walls. A roar with no enemy, no fear, only life, and a flicker of gratitude. Kamau stood still. In all his years as a ranger, he had heard hundreds of roars. But never had one carried such weight. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fierce, but it touched the deepest part of whoever heard it. The sun began to sink lower. Dark clouds slowly parted, revealing a few soft beams of light falling on the edge of the cliff. The place seemed to transform from a battlefield of survival into the scene of something nearly impossible. A lion, believed to be dying, pulled back from the abyss. By a man who carried no gun, no power, only a heart big enough to listen. The sunset slanted across the edge of the cliff, casting a golden hue on the dust clinging to the lion's back. The last rays of daylight quietly blanketed 2 still bodies on the rocky mountainside, one man, one wild beast, both freshly returned from the edge of death. Kamau hadn't stood up yet. He remained seated, just a few steps away from the lion, breathing slowly as if even a breeze might break the silence. Since the rescue, neither of them had made a move. No words, no unnecessary gestures, and none were needed. The old lion still sat, head gently lifted, eyes gazing toward the fading light. Its ears were perked, not in alertness, but as if listening to the wind slip through cracks in the stone. In those cloudy gray eyes, there was no sign of a predator, no glint of dominance. Instead, there was a quiet calm, like it had finally found something it had never reached in its lifetime: trust. Kamau wiped the sweat from his brow. His shirt clung to his back, and his hands burned red from rope and claw. But he didn't feel the pain. Inside him, all noise had gone silent. Only one thing remained, a strange sensation, a vast stillness. The lion still hadn't left. It slowly lowered its head. No roar, no growl, just a bow, like an old man greeting a benefactor when words fail. A simple gesture. But for a creature raised on dominance, bowing was an act of absolute trust. Kamau stood up. He didn't approach, just leaned slightly, one hand resting lightly on the hilt of the knife at his waist. Not out of fear, just reflex, an old habit from years of living on the razor's edge between life and death. But the lion didn't move. It glanced at him once, then turned its head toward a narrow trail leading deeper into the forest. Its hind legs still trembled slightly. Scratched paws dragged a faint trail of dried blood across the stone. Kamau knew it wouldn't get far just yet. He opened his backpack, pulled out a water pouch, and placed it a few steps away. He didn't bring it closer, because he understood. Keeping distance was also a form of respect. The lion glanced at the pouch, then at Kamau. Kamau nodded. What do you think about this story? If you found it interesting, comment good. If you weren't satisfied, type 1. And if you have your own opinion, feel free to share it in the comments section. Don't forget to hit subscribe to support the channel. It's completely free, but means so much to me. Thank you very much. Then with slow steps, it moved toward the pouch, not sniffing, not wary, just lowered its head and gently licked the drops seeping from the edge. Not desperately thirsty, but enough to show it accepted the offering. When it lifted its head again, another breeze passed through. Not strong, but enough to bend the crowns of distant trees. In the air was the scent of stone, dust, blood, and trust. Kamau stepped back, quietly gathering his things. He didn't stare, just glanced occasionally to make sure it was okay, still breathing, still alive, and still full of pride. Before leaving, Kamau looked back one last time. The lion was lying on its side, head resting on its front paws, eyes half closed. Not asleep, but not on guard either. A dim light fell across its thinning mane, not bright gold anymore, but still carrying the weary majesty of a warrior well past his prime. Kamau raised a hand, not a wave, just a slow gesture, like someone saying farewell to an old friend they might never see again. And then, it happened. The lion lifted its head, looked at him one final time, and let out a low growl. Not long, not loud, but enough for anyone listening to understand. I saw you. I will remember this. Kamau turned and walked back toward his vehicle. On the way down the mountain, he didn't look back. But in his mind, that sound lingered. Not in his ears, but in his chest. A feeling he knew might only come once in a lifetime. Back at the truck, Kamau sat quietly for a while, one hand resting on the steering wheel. The evening sun filtered through the windshield, flickering against the trees like the edges of a fading dream. He reached for his notebook and scribbled a quick entry. 5:35 p.m., old male lion. Serious injuries. Rescue successful. Reaction, no aggression, no panic. Clear emotional response. Silent connection. Profound. This is the first time I've felt truly trusted by a wild animal. Kamau stopped writing. He sat there for a long time, eyes lost in the distance. He didn't know how far the lion had gotten by now, but he was certain of one thing. It would keep living. Old, weak, but with one moment of being saved, of being trusted, it would live on as a creature that had been truly understood. And for him, the man of the wild, that was the only thing powerful enough to move a heart that had been silent for so many years. The next day, Kamau didn't return to the cliff. He woke up early, as usual, made a cup of hot tea, walked along the wooden corridor of the ranger station, and stopped at the west railing. From there, he could see the faint silhouette of the mountain range in the distance, the place where the old lion had once lifted its head and roared at the sky. The morning was quiet. The sun rose slowly, the wind was gentle, there was no roar. But Kamau still stood there, hands folded behind his back, eyes watching the edge of the forest as if waiting for something. Not because he expected it to come back. He just wanted a moment of silence, in the place where his soul was still tangled with the roar from the day before. On the far side of the mountain, in the shade of a gnarled old tree bent by the wind, the lion was also lying still, not sleeping, recovering. It hadn't eaten since the previous day, but its body was still warm. Its eyes were half closed, its ears still heard, its nose still smelled. No human scent, no sign of danger, just the sound of wind brushing across the rocks. And a feeling, hard to name, resting quietly inside its heart. A feeling like once, when its paws had slipped from the rock, someone had held on. It didn't know what that was, couldn't call it gratitude, couldn't call it trust. But its instincts, born to doubt everything, didn't reject what had just happened. In all his years as a ranger, Kamau had witnessed dozens of animal rescues. Elephants trapped in mud, antelopes caught in snares, even a mother leopard with a broken leg protecting her cubs. He had felt proud, even moved. But never, not once, had any creature looked at him the way the lion had that day. That look wasn't pleading, it wasn't panicked, it was just full presence. A presence that seemed to understand, if someone wants to save me, they will. And it had been right. That afternoon, a young ranger reported, "There are lion tracks up north, large, heavy, looks like it's limping." Kamau nodded. He didn't ask more. In his heart, he already knew. No need to confirm, no need to follow. The lion was still alive, and it had moved on. That was what mattered. A few days later, the rain came. The season's first rain, not heavy, but steady, softened the red dirt roads. Kamau drove around checking the drainage systems near the stations. When he passed the stretch of forest near the mountains, his tires left clear prints in the wet ground. He stopped to drink some water under a tree. And then, there, in the freshly pressed mud, he saw a paw print. Not as large as before, but heavy, pressed deep, a lion's print, traveling alone, in a straight line. Kamau didn't follow it. He just crouched down and gently touched the mark in the earth, like touching a memory that hadn't dried yet. Then he stood up and continued on. It wasn't indifference, it was understanding. Some creatures, once life has been given back to them, will never look back. But they will remember. A week passed. Kamau returned to his usual routine, patrolling the boundary, checking camera traps, watching for signs of poaching. But something inside him had shifted. He no longer walked past the mountain as before. Each time he came near, he paused, observed for a few minutes, then turned away, not out of fear, but out of respect for a disappearance. And then, one morning, when the sun broke through and the ground was still damp, with clouds thin as smoke, Kamau heard a roar. Not loud, not long, not fierce, but unmistakably a real roar. It didn't come from deep in the forest, nor was it very near. It came from somewhere between the wind and the rocks, as if just spoken aloud to say, "I'm still here, I'm still me." Kamau stopped, stood still. After a moment he smiled, but didn't answer. Because a roar like that doesn't need a reply. That afternoon, Kamau came home early. He pulled out his notebook, the one where he kept records of the wild animals he'd encountered. On the last page he wrote, "There was once a creature who survived because of trust, and I, once in my life, was quiet enough to hear it." He placed the notebook on the desk, turned off the light, and left the office. Far away, on the cliff under the early moonlight, the wind kept blowing. And somewhere, in the voice of the night forest, the quiet roar of an old lion still echoed, like a farewell song, like the final thank you of a beast that was once king.